You wake up and you can taste it, the metallic bitterness of your own decay. It sits on your tongue like copper, like old blood left to oxidize in winter air. The room reeks of infection, of rotting silk, of candles that burned out hours ago and left only the ghost of smoke. You try to breathe, but your lungs betray you, filling with fluid, drowning you from the inside. Each inhale is a slow collapse. Each exhale sounds wet, rattling like something breaking apart beneath your ribs. Your skin has turned the color of old parchment, yellow, brittle, as if you are already halfway to the grave, halfway to becoming a relic that history will catalogue and condemn. You are Catherine de Medici, Queen Mother of France, architect of an empire, and you are dying alone. The children you birthed, the sons you crowned, they are not here. The court you controlled like a chessboard has scattered. The throne you held together with poison and diplomacy crumbles without you, indifferent to your gasping. Power, you realize, is a performance, and when the curtain falls, the stage is empty. But your mind does not rest. It will not let you die in peace, because the ghosts are gathering now, pressing down on your chest with the weight of memory. 3 sons, 3 crowns, 3 coffins. You placed each diadem on their heads with your own hands, and each time you felt the weight transfer from gold to flesh, from symbol to curse. Francis, your firstborn, dead at 16. His body gave out before he could even grow into the throne. Charles, the Mad King, haunted by the screams of St Bartholomew's Day, dead at 23, coughing blood and begging God for forgiveness you never taught him to seek. And Henri, your favorite, your mirror, hated by his own people, soon to be murdered by a monk with a knife and a prayer. You told yourself you were protecting them, guiding them, but the throne room you built for them was a mausoleum dressed in velvet. The gold felt like chains, the power tasted like poison. Every decision you made to save the crown carved another piece from their souls, until there was nothing left but hollow boys wearing heavy metal, collapsing under the performance of majesty. Was it protection or destruction? Your body is rotting now because your legacy rotted first. The architecture of your life was built on bones, and bones do not hold. But it wasn't always this way. Once you were not the Queen Mother. Once you were just a girl who had to learn what power truly costs. Before the throne, before the crowns, before the rot, there was a girl. 14 years old, orphaned, Italian. Daughter of merchants, not monarchs. They called her the shopkeeper's daughter behind raised fans, their French syllables dripping with contempt. She arrived at court like a transaction, a political bargaining chip wrapped in expensive fabric, married to a prince who looked through her as if she were glass. Henri II, her husband. He gave her a ring on their wedding night, then spent the rest of his life giving everything else to Diane de Poitiers, his mistress, 20 years her senior, the woman he actually loved. You watch him gift her your jewels, the emeralds meant for your throat now resting on Diane's collarbone. You learn in those moments that love is transactional, that marriage is performance, that survival requires becoming stone when you were born tender. The court laughs at you, whispers that you are barren, useless, destined to be discarded, but you do not break. You study, you observe, you swallow your humiliation like medicine and let it calcify inside you, building armor from shame. Then, 1559, a joust, a splinter of wood through Henri's eye, piercing deep into his brain, 10 days of agony, then death. Your husband is gone. Diane is exiled. And you, the orphan, the shopkeeper's daughter, you are suddenly the most powerful woman in France. Liberation and curse. Because the world you inherit is drowning in blood. The world she inherits is not a kingdom, it is a wound that will not close. France is tearing itself apart,
Catholics and Huguenots, Christians who worship the same God but cannot agree on how to kneel. The wars of religion have begun, and the violence is not distant or abstract. It is intimate, personal. Streets that once echoed with hymns now echo with screams. Neighbors who prayed together now burn each other's homes, convinced that salvation requires the other's annihilation. Catherine sits in council chambers, where men debate theology while sharpening knives under the table. They speak of faith, but their eyes calculate territory. They invoke God's will, but their hands reach for power. She tries compromise. She tries tolerance. She tries to build bridges between the factions, believing that reason can cool the fever. But mercy, she learns, is seen as weakness. Compromise is called betrayal. Every concession she offers is taken as proof of her foreignness, her Italianness, her fundamental unfitness to rule French blood.
So she adapts. She learns. She realizes that to protect her sons, to keep their fragile bodies on their violent thrones, she must become the monster the court already believes she is. She begins to speak a new language. Every word is written in someone else's blood. And then comes the moment, the first calculated betrayal, the line she crosses, knowing she can never step back. The education is complete, the transformation irreversible. She marries her daughter to a Protestant prince. Margot, beautiful, defiant, hers, becomes a bargaining chip in a game of thrones. The groom is Henri of Navarre, a Huguenot, a heretic in the eyes of half of France. But Catherine sees past theology. She sees strategy. A marriage that could end the wars. A union that could stitch the wound. On the surface, peace. Beneath, calculation. But here is the question that haunts the wedding preparations. Does she feel anything? When she fits Margot's dress, when she arranges her daughter's hair, does some part of her fracture? Or has she already learned to sever love from duty, to amputate tenderness before it weakens her grip? The wedding is extravagant. Silk cascades like waterfalls. Flowers perfume the air, masking the rot underneath. Paris fills with Protestant nobles, invited to witness this union, this miracle of reconciliation. But it feels wrong. The festivities feel like a funeral dressed in gold. The laughter sounds forced. The toasts taste like metal. Because Catherine knows something her daughter does not. Something the guests celebrating in the streets cannot see. Protection and predation. They wear the same face when you've learned to survive at any cost. A mother's love and a mother's cruelty become indistinguishable when the throne demands sacrifice. The wedding bells ring across Paris, August 18th, 1572. But the sound is not celebration. It is a warning. And 6 days later, the streets will run red. August 24th, 1572. Just before dawn. You hear the bells first. Church bells ringing across Paris, not in celebration, but in signal. A call to arms, disguised as a call to prayer. Then the screams begin. Protestant nobles, invited as wedding guests, are dragged from their beds and butchered in the streets. The men who toasted peace 6 days ago now have their throats opened like sacrifices. Women clutch their children and die together. Blood runs down cobblestones, pooling in doorways, painting the city in shades of red you didn't know existed. You smell it. Gunpowder and open bodies. The iron-thick stench of mass slaughter. The Seine, that ancient river, turns crimson. Corpses float downstream like messages, like warnings written in flesh. Thousands die in Paris, tens of thousands across France. And the question that will haunt history: was Catherine the architect of this massacre, or did it spiral beyond her control? Did she light the match, or did she simply fail to extinguish the fire? But here is the truth that matters more than intention. She could have stopped it. From her palace windows, she watches France devour itself. She hears the screaming, she smells the smoke, and she chooses silence. Whether she ordered it or allowed it, the moral weight is the same. Complicity and command become indistinguishable when the streets run red. This is her point of no return. The night her soul calcifies completely, becomes stone, becomes monument. Her son Charles IX watches too, and something inside him breaks that will never heal. Charles IX begins to unravel. He wakes screaming in the night, clawing at his sheets, shouting about rivers of blood that won't stop flowing. Protestant ghosts gather at the foot of his bed, he says. Their opened throats accuse him in silence. The massacre haunts him. St Bartholomew's Day burrowed into his mind like a parasite, feeding on his sanity. He deteriorates. Hallucinations bloom in his fevered brain. His body rebels, coughing up blood, sweating through silk, collapsing under the weight of a crown he never wanted. At 23, he is dying, and on his deathbed, he confesses to his nurse, his voice breaking. "What bloodshed? What murders? I don't know where I am. What will become of me?" Guilt is eating him alive from the inside. But Catherine? She remains composed, a statue in the doorway. She watches her son drown in remorse, and already her mind calculates the next move. Henri will be king now, the third son, the final crown. Because guilt, you see, requires conscience. And Catherine has moved beyond that fragile human limitation. She has buried her conscience so deep it has fossilized, become artifact, become unreachable.
Charles dies choking on his own blood and his own shame. And Henri III descends, beautiful, extravagant, doomed. The son who will come to hate her most, the son who will understand, too late, what she made him become. Henri III becomes king, and the rot between them begins immediately. He resents her, the hovering presence, the whispered advice that sounds like commands, the assumption that he, like his brothers before him, is another puppet whose strings she alone can pull. She gave him everything, the crown, the education and cruelty, the survival instincts that kept him alive when his brothers died. But he cannot forgive her for making him what he is. They haunt the same palace like ghosts who refuse to cross paths. Conversations between them feel like negotiations between enemies. Every word measured, every gesture calculated. Love, if it ever existed, has curdled into something unrecognizable. Henri surrounds himself with male favorites, his mignons, beautiful young men who fill his court with decadence and scandal. He throws extravagant parties while France starves. He makes decisions that horrify Catherine, ignoring her counsel, flaunting his independence like a weapon. But beneath the rebellion, beneath the defiance, there is something darker. He knows what she did, the massacre, the betrayals, the bodies she stacked to build his throne. And it disgusts him. Can a son love a mother whose love is indistinguishable from violence? Can gratitude survive when it is built on graves? The question remains unanswered,
because France itself is collapsing now. The wars of religion reach apocalyptic fever, and their fractured rule cannot hold the kingdom together. The center cannot hold, and something monstrous is rising. By the 1580s, France is no longer a kingdom. It is a wound that has learned to walk. Catholic League against Huguenots against Crown, cities under siege, assassinations at dawn, starvation in the streets. The nation has forgotten how to be anything but violent. War is no longer the exception, it is the language, the currency, the daily bread. Bodies hang from city gates, left to rot as warnings. Children die of plague in alleyways, their small corpses stepped over by soldiers marching to the next massacre. Priests bless swords instead of offering communion. God has become a justification for slaughter, prayer a prelude to bloodshed. Catherine, now in her 60s, still maneuvers, still negotiates, still sends letters, arranges meetings, whispers strategies into the ears of men who no longer listen. But the machinery of violence has outgrown its architect. She built this system to protect her sons, to secure the throne, to survive the chaos, but it no longer needs her. It runs on its own momentum now, self-sustaining, self-replicating, feeding on hate and memory and the irresistible gravity of revenge. She begins to feel it, her irrelevance, her obsolescence. The empire she constructed is devouring everything, including her children, and she can no longer control it. Her body begins to fail. The signs are small at first, a persistent cough, joints that ache in the cold, a heaviness in her chest that will not lift. The rot is coming for her now. Late 1588. Her body begins to remember. Lung infection, fever that won't break, swelling in her legs, her hands, as if something inside her is expanding, trying to escape. Pain that moves through her like a living thing, mapping every betrayal onto flesh. It feels like haunting, as if all the violence she orchestrated has finally found its way home, manifesting in her own tissue, her own blood. Each symptom is a ghost demanding acknowledgement. Each cough brings up not just fluid, but memory. She becomes bedridden in the Château de Blois. For the first time in decades, she is forced into stillness. No counsels to manipulate, no letters to write, no strategies to deploy. Just her, alone, trapped inside a failing body with nothing but her own history for company. This is the horror of forced reflection, when you can no longer outrun what you've done, when your body becomes a prison and the only cellmate is your past. Does she feel guilt? Does regret finally crack through the stone she built around herself? Or is there only rage, fury at her own weakness, at the betrayal of flesh that once obeyed her will? The answer remains locked behind her eyes. But even now, even here, one final horror awaits, because her son Henri has learned her lessons too well. December 23rd, 1588. The Duke of Guise is summoned to the king's chamber, and he will not leave alive. December 23rd, 1588. While Catherine lies in her chamber, lungs drowning, body failing, her son Henri III orders an assassination in the very same palace. The Duke of Guise, leader of the Catholic League, the man who threatened Henri's throne, who commanded armies, who believed himself untouchable. He is summoned to the king's chamber. 8 men with daggers are waiting. They fall upon him like wolves. He fights. God, he fights. But there are too many blades, too many hands. He collapses in a spreading pool of his own blood, gasping prayers that will not save him. The sounds echo through the palace walls, steel on flesh, gurgling. Silence. 1 floor above, An old woman drowns in her own fluids, too weak to rise, perhaps too weak to even understand what is happening below. Some historians say she begged him not to do it, that she warned him this murder would destroy him, that killing Guise would ignite a fire that would consume them both. But others say she was too far gone, too lost in fever and memory to comprehend. But here is the devastating poetry. The Queen Mother who built her legacy on political murder is now powerless to stop her own son from committing one. Her final lesson was how to kill, and he learned it perfectly. Has she created a monster, or simply revealed the monster that power always demands? The answer doesn't matter anymore, because after Guise's death, Henri stops visiting her chamber. She will die alone, as she lived, surrounded by ghosts. Early January 1589. She is dying, and she is alone. Henri III has abandoned Blois. Her daughters are scattered across Europe, married into foreign courts, their letters polite and distant. Her attendants move through the chamber like ghosts performing rituals for someone already dead, adjusting pillows, wiping sweat, whispering prayers she cannot hear. The woman who controlled France now cannot control her own breathing. The bed is vast. The room is cold. Curtains are drawn against the pale winter light as if darkness might be kinder than witnessing her collapse. The air is thick with the smell of sickness and old perfume, decay masked by lavender and rose. She drifts in and out of consciousness. In those liminal moments, does she see them? The faces of those she destroyed? Does she see Charles IX, his guilt-ridden eyes accusing her from beyond? Does she hear the screams of St Bartholomew's morning, bells ringing eternal in her skull? Or is there only darkness? Only the void she built around herself, brick by calculated brick? You die as you lived. She lived in isolation, using people as instruments, never trusting them as companions. Power was her only intimacy, strategy her only language. And now, isolation is her only companion, silence her only conversation. Her mind wanders, unmoored from time. And in those final drifting hours, what does a woman like Catherine de Medici think about when she knows the end has come? The borders dissolve. You are 14 again, arriving in France wrapped in silk and shame. You are 39, watching your husband die with a splinter in his eye. You are holding your firstborn son, and he is cold, already cold, 16 years old and already a corpse. The bells are ringing, always ringing, St Bartholomew's bells, wedding bells, funeral bells. They blend into a single endless tolling that never stops, never forgives. You smell burning flesh, Protestant bodies lit like torches in the streets of Paris. You smell your own decay, the rot inside your lungs, the infection eating you from within. You see Diane de Poitiers wearing your emerald.
You see Charles IX coughing blood. You see Henri turning away from you, his face carved from disgust and love in equal measure. You built an empire of bones and called it love. You fed your children to the throne and called it protection. You orchestrated massacres and called it necessity. But what is necessity when measured against a river of corpses? What is protection when all your sons are dead or dying or damned? The memories fragment, shatter, reassemble in shapes that make no sense. You are crowning a king. You are signing a death warrant. You are alone in a room that smells like rot. Did you regret? Did you ever? Or was regret another weakness you amputated before it could infect you? The question dissolves before you can answer. The self dissolves. The history dissolves. And all that remains is the body, failing, falling, finished. January 5th, 1589. The lungs stop pulling air. The heart ceases its rhythm. Consciousness, that relentless calculating engine that maneuvered empires and orchestrated massacres, flickers once, twice, and extinguishes. Catherine de Medici dies in her bed at Blois. The room is cold. Winter light barely penetrates the drawn curtains. Perhaps an attendant is present, kneeling nearby, whispering prayers. Perhaps not. Either way, it doesn't matter. She dies as she lived, fundamentally alone. The body that commanded armies, that birthed kings, that held France together through sheer will and violence, it is just meat now, just bone and cooling flesh, already beginning the slow collapse back into earth, the inevitable democracy of decay. There is no grand revelation in her final moment, no deathbed confession, no angel descending to offer judgment or forgiveness, just the cessation of breath, the stopping of a clock. No speeches are given, no bells ring across Paris to announce the Queen Mother's passing. France is too busy tearing itself apart to notice that the architect of its suffering has finally fallen silent. Even death offers no resolution, no redemption, no final truth that makes sense of the carnage. She simply stops, and the world, indifferent and violent and endlessly hungry, continues without her. But how did France respond when they finally learned the Queen Mother was gone? France barely notices. The wars of religion rage on, devouring cities, burning villages, stacking corpses like cordwood. The machinery of violence she helped build operates without pause, without acknowledgement of her absence. Within months, Henri III, her last surviving son, the final crown, will be assassinated. A monk named Jacques Clément will approach him with a message and a hidden knife. One thrust to the abdomen. The king will die slowly, painfully, whispering forgiveness his mother never taught him. The Valois dynasty ends in blood, as it lived. Catherine's funeral is delayed, modest, almost forgotten. No grand procession through Paris, no monuments erected in her honor. The woman who orchestrated massacres, who controlled 3 kings, who shaped France through decades of calculated cruelty, she becomes a footnote almost immediately. History moves on with terrifying speed. The empire she built forgets her before her body is even cold. This is the philosophical horror at the center of power. You can sacrifice everything, betray everyone, orchestrate atrocities in the name of legacy, and still be forgotten within a generation, erased by the next wave of violence you helped make inevitable. Blood washes away blood. Empires built on carnage are replaced by new empires built on fresh carnage. And the architects? They dissolve into dust and disputed footnotes. But how is she remembered now, centuries later? For centuries after her death, Catherine de Medici was remembered as a monster. The Italian poisoner, the architect of Massacre, the serpent queen who corrupted France with foreign cruelty. Protestant writers painted her as the whore of Babylon. Catholic historians called her a heretic enabler. Everyone agreed she was evil. They only disagreed on which side she betrayed. History transformed her into symbol, into warning, into the nightmare of what happens when women grasp for power in a world built to deny them. But was she actually a monster? Or did she simply play the game of power by the only rules available to women in her time? Look at her portraits. The face is cold, calculating, almost reptilian, eyes that reveal nothing, lips pressed into a line that suggests neither smile nor frown, just control. We painted her this way because it confirmed what we needed to believe, that power in the hands of a woman becomes something unnatural, something grotesque. History is written by those who survive, and Catherine survived by becoming what her enemies said she was. But beneath the legend, there was a 14-year-old orphan who arrived in France with nothing, a mother who buried 3 sons, a woman who learned that love is a luxury power cannot afford. This doesn't redeem her. Redemption isn't the point. Understanding the machinery that creates figures like her, that is the point. So what can we learn from her horror? What truth does her nightmare reveal about power itself? What does her life teach us? That power without love becomes monstrous. That protecting those you love can become indistinguishable from destroying them. That empires built on violence collapse into violence generation after generation until the architecture itself becomes a tomb. Catherine's tragedy is not that she was evil, it's that she was human. She made choices we understand, even as they horrify us. Survival, protection, the willingness to sacrifice principle for the people we can't bear to lose. But somewhere along the way, the protecting became controlling. The love became possession. The strategy became massacre. And she crossed lines she could never uncross, until there was no self left beneath the armor, only the role, only the performance, only the Queen Mother drowning in her own machinery. You see her in every leader who chooses power over principle, in every parent whose fierce love curdles into suffocating control, in every empire that builds itself on bones and calls it civilization. Her horror is not foreign. It is human. It is the question we all face when survival demands cruelty. How much of yourself will you sacrifice to protect what you love? And at what point does the protection become the very thing that destroys? History repeats, because we repeat. The names change, the costumes change, but the machinery, the terrible geometry of power and violence and love twisted into weapons, it remains. And so we return one final time to the deathbed. You return to the room where we began. January 5th, 1589. The body in the bed, the metallic taste of decay, the cold that presses against the windows like something alive, something patient. But now you understand what led here. Every choice that seemed necessary in the moment, every betrayal disguised as protection, every crown that became a curse, every massacre that promised peace but delivered only more hunger for blood. The room is still cold, The body is still rotting. Nothing has changed, except now
You carry the weight of knowing. Her last breath is shallow, barely a whisper. The chest rises one final time, hesitates, and then settles into stillness. Silence follows. Not peaceful, just absent. The kind of silence that fills the space where a heartbeat used to be. The attendant, if there is one, crosses herself and leaves quietly. The candles burn low, the room empties, and Catherine de Medici, Queen Mother, architect of empires, orchestrator of massacres, becomes just a corpse cooling in winter air. Outside, France continues tearing itself apart. The wars rage on. Her son will die soon. The dynasty will collapse, and history will move forward, relentless and indifferent, building new horrors on the bones of the old. She died alone. She died choking. She died with a name that history would spit on for centuries. And in the end, she died human, which might be the most horrifying truth of all.